does Hideo Kojima get his ideas? In this podcast, we take a deep dive into his brain and shed light on his creative process. Hideo Kojima presents Brain Structure.
こんにちは、小島秀夫です。ポッドキャストプログラム秀夫小島プレゼンツ、Brain Structure.
Hello, Hideo Kojima here with the podcast program Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure. And here's my partner for today.
Hello, everyone. It's Jeff Keighley from the Game Awards and TGA, the Jeff's Answer. Hello, Mr. Kojima. It's great to talk with you. Yes, we were just wrapping up the Game Awards here in Los Angeles when this is airing, so hopefully many people have seen TGA. We worked all year on it, and of course, it was such an honor to have you with me in Los Angeles, but we're taping this before the TGA, even though there was the big announcement at TGA that we'll talk about. But today, we're going to talk about Death Stranding, which is, of course, the start of Kojima Productions and the first ever title that you released. And it's a game that was very special and close to my heart that, we were able to work with you on it for many times. I remember at E3, you were with us when you teased the letters DS on stage with me on the YouTube show, and then you announced at the PlayStation press conference. And over the years, we had many great opportunities to work with you on trailers for the first Death Stranding. I think we did 2 of them at Game Awards, and we even worked together on the intro movie for Kojima Productions that we did at Comic-Con one year. So Death Stranding, we just wanted to talk a little bit more about that game and what it's meant to me and to you and to all the players around the world. And of course, we're all very excited that you're stepping back into that world. But Hideo, maybe let's rewind back to the start of Death Stranding. And I know when you founded Kojima Productions, you really, you were in a naked place, for lack of a better term, and that you were starting anew and you had to create something brand new from scratch. You had to find the game engine, which you did with the Decima engine from Guerrilla. But you wanted to create, I know, a story that was entirely new. What was the original inspiration for Death Stranding?
Well, I went independent on December 16th, 2015. I didn't have a studio. The only things I had were 4 staff members, my computer, and my iPhone. And from there, I had to create a new game. But what I was hearing from friends and from users around the world was that they were expecting a AAA title as usual, but one with a completely new gameplay, look, and world settings. They said it had to be a Hideo Kojima game, meaning it had to have a theme, a message, and a story. I had a few ideas in mind for what I wanted to make, and Death Stranding happened to be the one that best suited our style and one we felt we could work our hardest on. I knew I had to make an open world game, so I kept that in mind as I searched for the right engine for the job. That's when I found Guerrilla's Decima engine, and they were kind enough to me to use it. And though we are in the middle of a pandemic now, at the time I never dreamed that something like this would happen. But even back then, there was isolation and fragmentations all over the world. So I wanted to make that the theme. And while games these days are all about battling, I wanted to create a game that connected people. I often use the analogy of a stick and a rope. There are stick games where people fight, but I wanted mine to encompass the concept of a rope used to connect and bring people together. So that was the start.
Yeah, the concept, as you said, of Sam being a porter and moving through the environment. A lot of people, as you said, were wondering what the gameplay was that you wanted to create with Death Stranding. When you look back on the conception of the game and the final product that you created, do you think you achieved your vision of what you set out to do with Death Stranding?
Yeah, I would say so. I think theme-wise and gameplay-wise, we created what we had in mind. Especially the social strand system, the SSS. I was a little worried at first regarding the gameplay concept of being loosely connected with other people on the internet, but I think it worked out well in the end. The look of the game or the setting is all pretty much the same right now. World War I, World War II, or futuristic sci-fi, steampunk, and fantasy are all quite common. I wanted to provide a different look to it, and so I used Iceland as one of the concepts in order to incorporate a bit of surrealism to the world. I think this ended up pretty close to what I had imagined at the start too.
you talked about Iceland, and we should maybe take a minute to talk about Low Roar and Ryan and the song I'll Keep Coming, because that I know was a big inspiration for you. And I remember you were in Iceland actually and found that album. Of course, we're all very sad a few months ago when we lost Ryan at such a young age of just 40. But could you maybe tell us a bit about that song and Ryan and the band and how that inspired Death Stranding?
2016年の6月に最初 E3 で
So I released the first teaser in June of 2016 at E3. I still didn't have a studio then. I was in a temporary office space with very few staff, and that's where we scanned Norman. As far as digital contents go, we basically only had a naked Norman, a naked Lou, a beach, and a whale. And well, that reflected the state that Kojima Productions was in. We were naked. We had no house, no rooms, we didn't even have a sound team put together. And just as I was racking my brain for what I should do, the song I'll Keep Coming by Low Roar popped into my head. I bought their CD at a CD shop in Iceland when I visited there a while back. Their album was playing in the shop and I really liked it. And I'll Keep Coming was in that album. I thought that the concept of the teaser and the lyrics in I'll Keep Coming matched perfectly as my first teaser post-independence. And when I put it all together, it was as if I had intentionally created for this song. The visuals looked like they had been made in sync with the sound. It really was perfect, and that's how we got started.
Low Roar のアルバムはその時2枚目
Low Roar had released their second album at the time. I had obviously listened to the first album and was good friends with Ryan. I built up the world of Death Stranding in parallel with Ryan's music, and I talked to him about how I wanted to use his music in the game too, not just a teaser. He told me he was working on his third album, and he shared that with me before it was completed. While I went through the process of picking out songs I wanted in the game, they released that third album. And then, when their fourth album was nearly ready, Ryan sent me more songs to choose from that album. In the end, the game was completed just before their fourth album was released, so we worked on it together for a long time. I hadn't been in touch with him lately due to the pandemic. We always gave each other likes on Instagram, and in making DS2, I knew Ryan's songs were essential, so I was going to call him up soon. And that's when the tragic news came in of his passing. I'm completely shocked.
Yeah, no, very, very, very sad, but I'm glad his music will live on for all of us. And of course, I know DS was very important to him, and we were honored we had him at, I think it was E3 one year. He performed, and he came to the E3 Coliseum one year and performed for all of us. I'll Keep Coming, which was very special. And yeah, a very beautiful band and a beautiful song. One other thing I wanted to talk about was actually, I remember that year at E3, I remember you ran into Troy Baker backstage and you said to him, "Oh, I might have something for you." And that's when I think I found that he was probably going to be in DS and obviously went on to go play Higgs. But I wanted to ask you about the cast, because you assembled such an eclectic, amazing cast, from Lindsay Wagner to Lea Seydoux to Norman Reedus to Guillermo to Nicholas to Troy to Tommy. I mean, there's so many amazing actors in this game. Tell us a bit about the casting process for Death Stranding. I know it started with Norman, but how quickly did you come up with all the other characters?
まあその独立した時に何もなかった
So yeah, after going independent, I had nothing. All I had were connections with people, so I followed those connections to make the game. It was the same with casting. I had worked with Norman Reedus during PT. Nicholas Refn and Guillermo del Toro I had relations with prior, and Troy Baker too, who I worked with for Metal Gear Solid 5. I had all these connections. But from the beginning, even during the scenario and concept building stage, I had these castings in mind, like Mads Mikkelsen for Cliff, Lea Seydoux for Fragile, and Lindsay Wagner for Amelie. And so the final cast members were not far off from my original idea. With Matt's, the very first time I met Nicholas, he gave me Matt's address. I think I've said many times on many occasions, but I contacted Matt and planned to give him a presentation. I visited Nicholas in Denmark to discuss this with him, but at the time, he was doing Neon Demon and was working with Keanu Reeves. So Nicholas kept telling me he thought Keanu was better for the role. And we were at this restaurant in Denmark, and the owner there was like, yeah, I see Mads like every day on TV. So people told me to go with Keanu, but I was always for Mads. I made that character for Mads. And we did a video call the first time around, but then later met up at Comic-Con and pitched the idea to him there.
で一番キャスティングで思い出深いのはリンゼさんなんです。
The most memorable casting for me is Lindsay. She was my number one idol growing up. Whenever I work on a project, I take it on as if it's going to be my last. And so, just in case Death Stranding became my last work, I wanted Lindsay to be a part of it. And well, she agreed to meet with me, but she didn't think kindly of mainstream video games that were all about shooting and fighting with sticks. So, her participation was uncertain. Kyle Cooper let us use his studio space to meet with Lindsay. There, we talked about the concept of the rope and how the other games may be sticks, but mine was a rope. We talked for about 3 hours, and Lindsay really understood me and got on board about joining the cast. I was really happy. I was worried she would decline. I don't know what I would have done in that case.
Was there anyone that you wanted to cast in Death Stranding that you didn't get or said no to you?
ないです、ないです。
No, no one.
That's lucky. That's good to hear.
ね、ちょっと幸か不幸かですね。
For better or worse, I had some sort of connection or a foot in the door with many of these people, regardless of whether or not they were aware of it. Their friends may be my fans, or like in Matt's case, his son was a fan of mine. So I was pretty lucky. And movies are different from games in that movie shoots take 3 or 4 months to film in a closed set, maybe 6 months to a year for big movies. But for games, scenes are shot as the game itself is being made, so it takes a long time. The actors have other movies they work on during this time, and we have to schedule shoots in between their other priorities. Not only that, but the story also changes frequently. We shoot things before the script is finalized. It's not very common for actors to agree to such a project, but everyone understood and put their trust in me. I'm really grateful that they all accepted it.
You mentioned you were rewriting or changing the game. I'm curious, are there like deleted scenes from the game, or what was the biggest change that you made to the story that fans might be interested to hear about?
いや、そんな大きな変化はないですね、エンディング。
No, not really. I didn't make any big changes per se, like cutting the ending or something like that. I did change the details on the characters though. I would spend time with them at performance captures or at dinners, and I really got to see their personalities, like their facial expressions and body movements. And I would add in those details to their characters. For instance, real-life Matt smokes, but Cliff's character at that time wasn't a smoker. But after meeting Matt in person, we went through the process of solidifying his character together.
When you think of the game, how much of it did you rewrite? You said you did many different scenes. Like, was it 20% you redid, or what is the process on Death Stranding? Was it more or less than a regular game?
これはもうデストだけじゃなくて僕の
This
ゲーム
isn't the case for just Death Stranding. I do this with all of my games, but I write the concept and game design and scenario myself. I direct the performances and create the character and world settings as well, so I try to make improvements all the time. The settings for the characters and the world may be vague at first, but once the cast is set, we can make detailed changes here and there. Even when the costumes and accessories are already decided, detail is the most important thing, so we add in small stuff as we shoot. And when we add stuff in, that may affect the world setting or the story, so we make corrections or supplements to reflect those changes. When the story changes, we need to adjust the game too. This process would be impossible if we were to outsource the scenario writing, which is why we do it all in-house.
ダイ・ハードマンとかしんちゃんの設定で
For example, Die Hardman was just a normal guy in Yoji's first draft. His clothes were different too. Once we created a model with Tommy, we added the mask and changed every detail on his costume. Higgs too. His face was just Troy's face at first, but I wanted to make it kind of Egyptian, so we added in those writings on his forehead. If I raise the bar on one character though, the other ones lose to it, so then I touch up on the details of those other characters. I try to create a nice balance in the end. Another example would be Fragile. Her leather jacket with the spikes that come out, I added those spikes later as a metaphor for her character to stand out more. It wasn't just for Death Stranding. I did this with Metal Gear 2. I do this sort of thing every day, so the staff hate me for it.
Yes, but that's why we love you. The thing I wanted to ask you about was on DS. It was a long, hard project for you being independent. What was the darkest time for you in the development of the game? Was it at the beginning or at the end, or did you have any sort of downtime when you were really feeling like you were worried how the game was turning out, or when you were concerned? Did that ever happen during the development?
No, I don't think I was ever that worried. It's not like I had 100 or 150 employees to start, so we gradually built up the studio, and we never had any loss or major confusion. You know, we were trying to create something new, and that's usually a very difficult thing to do. But we made several teasers leading up to it, and during that time, I was able to share my ideas and get consensus from my staff, so it wasn't that hard. There was one incident that was really tough, the 2016 SAG strike. I thought it would end in 2 or 3 months, but it went on for a year. And during that period, we couldn't negotiate with actors about shooting or anything of the sort. Other large studios moved on to hire non-SAG actors. But for us, we had already announced Norman and Mats to the public and weren't about to change that. So that year was hard. I didn't know what was going to happen. And also, I had to handle new staff members since it was a brand new studio. There were veteran staff like Yoji too, but I had to teach the new people my way of making things, my culture, basically. Many people didn't understand, of course, so taking the time to do that was a bit difficult. I needed to be hands-on most of the time, but that's about it, I think, as far as difficult times go.
The game has been out now for, I guess, it's been 3 years, a little more than 3 years since the release of it, which is incredible. And the last time we saw you before TGA this year in person was at TGA 2019 when you won the award for Best Game Direction. And Churches performed and opened the show, and Norman was there. That was a very special night. When you reflect back on the first Death Stranding, were you happy with the response from the critics and the fans? Do you think people understood your intention? Because you were doing something that was different than, as you said, the traditional stick game that's all about just action and combat. Do you think the audience and the media really understood what you were trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think there are people among the media and the users who understood it. I experienced the same thing every time, and it was the same with Metal Gear and Boktai 2. But at the very beginning, there are both positive and negative reviews. Whenever you make something brand new, people give their pros and cons. And within the 3 years since the release of Death Stranding, the pandemic happened, which I think led to a change in the reception of the game. The game is on platforms like PlayStation Plus and has reached a wider audience, and even those who are not hardcore gamers have come to enjoy playing Death Stranding. I think it takes 3 to 5 years for a game to receive proper evaluation. For Metal Gear, it wasn't until after 1, 2, and 3 that it gained acceptance and people finally started to understand. So in that same sense, I think Death Stranding will begin to be understood little by little.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I think over time, everyone's realized, it's a game that has to sort of, you have to sit with it for a little bit, and you have to sort of play it in a less deliberate way. If you can't race through it, you really have to enjoy the experience. So I think as people have been able to, marinate and sort of experience it over time, people have come to see sort of the vision of what you were trying to do. And one of the reasons I was very excited you won the Best Game Direction Award was that you did try something innovative and different with the approach to the game. And that's often something that we should reward, is that games that are different and not just predictable of the same gameplay and the same experience. So that's why I think we're all very excited to think about what you're likely doing with DS2, although I know we can't get into any more details than what we saw in the teaser. I can't wait to see where you're going to take the the gameplay for DS2.
Well, I was already thinking about DS2 while I was making DS1. Whenever you're creating a new game or a new IP, it's difficult to establish a game system after just the first game. This was the same for Metal Gear and Stealth, so I've learned from past experience. So, for the first Death Stranding, I was already envisioning a sequel as I was making the first one. It was already in my mind. I had all the details worked out too. But then, 3 months after DS1 release, COVID happened, and it's still happening today. There was a lot that I thought about during the pandemic and the way the world was headed. My previous screenplay did not make sense anymore. So I rewrote all of it.
あらゆるエンタメに
The ideas you may have had pre-COVID are more than likely no longer applicable post-COVID, given what the users, the audience, have gone through. I think the same can be said for every type of entertainment, and I think creators of all media think this way. And so DS2 is the result of restarting from zero. At the end of the teaser, you'll see the line, "Should we have connected?" That is the theme this time around. The last game was a rope game where you connected the divided, isolated people. Connecting was righteous. Then the pandemic occurred. So now the question is, what happens from here? And DS2 is all about that.
I can't wait to learn more. And yeah, that phrase, "should we have connected?" It's almost like that sense of regret of sort of you should have done something before that you haven't, and now you realize that you didn't have the opportunity. So yeah, I'm very excited to see where your mind is going to take us for DS2, and it's been great to talk with you today. And of course, all the fans will be talking for many months about DS2, and I know in the coming weeks we're gonna have some other special episodes of the Brain Structure with some special guests to talk more about DS2.
そうですね。ちょっと今は、ティザーで
Yes, for now I want people to discuss the teaser. Have fun with it as you think about what may or may not happen. Use games as topic of conversation. Use it as an ingredient to create communication.
But we have many questions, and I'm sure the speculation on Reddit and online is going lots of places, and we look forward to learning more about it. Well, this has been a very special episode of Brain Structure. That's it for today's episode, but as I mentioned, Hideo and I will be back with some special guests in the coming weeks related to DS2, and that's all I'll say for now. Brain Structure's mailbox is still open, so please continue sending us any messages or questions you have for Hideo, your thoughts on the podcast, and guests or topics you would like us to cover on the show. The link to the message form can be found in the episode description.
ということで、来週の秀夫
We'll see you again on next week's episode of Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure.
さようなら。
Where does Hideo Kojima get his ideas? In this podcast, we take a deep dive into his brain and shed light on his creative process. Hideo Kojima presents Brain Structure.
はい、こんにちは、小島秀夫です。ポッドキャストプログラム、秀夫小島プレゼンツ、ブレインストラクチャー。
Hello, Hideo Kojima here with the podcast program Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure. Today, we have a special guest joining us from overseas. So my partner for today will be this guy in Los Angeles.
Thank you, Mr. Kojima, and hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Keighley, producer of the Game Awards, and TGA, the Jeff's Answer. Mr. Kojima, as always, thank you for having me on Brain Structure. I've been enjoying all the shows we've been doing together, and I'm very much looking forward to emceeing with you today because our guest is perhaps someone whose listeners have been waiting for ever since this podcast launched. Of course, the actor behind Sam Bridges in Death Stranding, Norman Reedus, is here. Let's jump in and hear what Hideo and Norman have to say.
ノーマンよろしくお願いします。
Thank you, Norman, for being on the show.
It's my pleasure. What an honor. Thank you for having me.
いや、こちらこそ。
No, the pleasure is all ours. Without you, I wouldn't be here, and Kojima Productions wouldn't be here. It's all thanks to you, Norman.
I love you.
I was thinking back to the DS2 trailer teaser that we just aired, but thinking back to the first DS teaser that you did at E3 with Norman on the beach, and that was such a profound moment. But Norman, that wasn't the first thing, because you guys had worked together previously on the PT project, and you had a couple things that you were trying to do together. How did you guys first met? Was it through Guillermo?
My first introduction was through Guillermo. He called me and he said, there's somebody that's going to meet you. His name's Hideo. Just say yes. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, don't be an asshole. Just say yes. And I met him in San Diego.
Yeah, yeah.
And he came down there and showed me some of the things he was working on. And we went back into the back of a restaurant. And I sat there with an iPad and watched some things he was working on. And I said yes right away.
Yeah, I remember that Comic-Con, because I remember Hideo had his phone and he passed it over to me and hit a photo on it. And I was like, I'm about to meet with this guy. And it's like, oh, wow, I'm going to meet with Norman.
最初2010
I think it was 2011. I was talking with Guillermo about PT, and he contacted Norman. So then we went to Comic-Con in San Diego and met Norman there for the first time. And at the end of that same year, Norman came to Japan, so we scanned him and we made the PT trailer. It was unfortunate that PT never saw the light of day. Soon after, in December of 2015, I went independent. I didn't have anything, you know. And in January of 2016, I traveled to studios all over the world in search of an engine. That's when I visited Sony's VASG studio, where we do scans and performance captures. And I thought, oh, I should use this place. Then, in February 2016, I met Norman in Los Angeles and pitched him my ideas verbally, without papers or anything to show him. He agreed right away, which is honestly unthinkable under normal circumstances. And in the following month, we took scans and performance captures of that scene in the teaser. Looking back, what we were doing was crazy. I really owe it to Norman for saying yes. We were able to make Death Stranding thanks to Norman.
When Guillermo called me, he said, just be yes. And I just say yes. There's certain people that I've met along the way that are just say yes to people. And when he told me this about you, I instantly knew why. I was like, he's a next level thinker who's just a total badass, and I would follow him into the abyss. And when I met you, I knew that's who you were, and you've been like that ever since we've ever hung out. So I'm glad I said yes.
What was it about? Do you remember that when he first pitched you DS, he said he didn't even really have the full concept for the game yet, but what struck you about Hideo? I mean, Guillermo already had told you, hey, you got to say yes to this guy. But when you finally met with him, what struck you about Hideo? You've worked with a lot of interesting creative people in your career. What's set him apart?
Yeah, it's funny because I've done movies with Guillermo, and Guillermo he's the type of guy that, like, he'll sit behind the monitor during a fight scene and he'll be like, good, punch the screen. And his level of enthusiasm and fearlessness is completely, it just takes you over. It's just infectious. And Hideo has that same sort of thing. There's very few people you meet, along the way that you believe them wholeheartedly. And, he's describing me the concept behind Death Stranding, and I'm sitting here just scratching my head, going, "Wait, what? But what are you talking about? What?" And it's not one of those conversations that he's gonna, you're gonna hear a pitch for and totally understand it. And so the point of me asking a million questions of it's not going to make sense anyway, not to me anyway. So you follow Hideo's enthusiasm, and his creativity is just endless, and that. So there is a little piece of me that felt like I was just covering my eyes and jumping on a roller coaster and saying, "Drive, Hideo, drive!" So, but you trust it the entire time. He's just got that thing.
Did you know you were going to be naked on the beach in the first teaser?
It didn't matter. He could have me naked on a beach having sex with a whale. I'd have said yes. So.
That was in the early days of our studio, when we only had a temporary office and hardly any equipment. I was basically naked. And then Norman appears, also naked. The only models I had were of a beach, naked Norman, a baby, and a whale. That teaser was, in a way, a declaration of my new start. It really was a reflection of my situation at the time. And well, the movie stars I looked up to as a kid were Steve McQueen and Charles Bronson, and they were the type of people who could become heroes just by standing there. They don't even have to say anything. There are very few actors like that nowadays, but I see that potential in Norman, which is why I didn't give him any lines. I challenged myself to create a teaser using only Norman's standing figure and facial expressions. I was able to take on that challenge and was only able to succeed thanks to Norman.
Thank you.
Sam as a character, I know you said like you really, wrote the character based on Norman, and it was sort of, very key that Norman said yes. And when he said yes, I mean, a lot of Norman is in Sam, right? So you must have, did you talk to Norman a lot to kind of figure out who Sam was as a character, or how did you develop the Sam character with Norman?
まあ当然会って食事したり
Yeah, well, I would of course meet with him and go out to dinner and whatnot. I think most people don't know the regular Norman. In other words, they only know him through his acting. And of course, I want to use that side of him too, but there's a charm to regular Norman, like his playful and cute personality. So, I wanted to incorporate these elements into the game. That's where the private room scene comes into play. Inside that room, it's not really Sam, it's basically Norman. I was able to implement both sides of Norman in a way that was only made possible because it's a game. I don't think this could have been done in a movie.
Yeah, I remember being in that, shooting some of those things. And I'd be waiting and I'd go, thinking about whatever. And he would go, do that again. And I'm like, well, what did I do? He yawned and kind of scratched your neck. And I was like, I did? And we kept doing more and more of it. And then I started to understand what he was doing with it. And it made sense. It made I think it made the person playing the game feel more connected to the character because there were real person things happening, Made total sense to me. You did.
And it's such a game about, connection, right? So that was sort of, there's always a deeper meaning to all of Hideo's games. When you were shooting it, Norman, and kind of going through the script and the performance capture, did you fully understand what the game was about, or when Hideo talked to you about the meaning of it? Because it's a complicated story, right, with many characters, but it has a very sort of simple premise about that idea of connection.
I understood the simple premise. There were certain elements I didn't understand, and I would just kind of keep my mouth shut, and then they would slowly reveal some of themselves to them as we were going through storyboards and stuff. It's a lot to understand in a mocap session or 20, because there's a lot going on, and it was really my first experience ever doing mocap. So I was just learning how to do mocap, and then you can't help but play with your mocap and be like, wow, I can do all these things. And it's a whole new world for me. So to understand 100% of the game right then there on the spot, no, it's impossible. I'm not that smart. I'm just following his lead because I know he is that smart.
Norman says it was his first time doing performance capture, but on set, he took the lead. Leia, who plays Fragile, was also feeling quite nervous, but Norman was always supporting her. He really helped to create a great environment on set, and I'm really thankful.
It's very fun. It was very fun to see in real time happening. You can't help but be in a good mood, because it's just so otherworldly, the whole thing. It's funny because we were doing the first one, and I was explaining to somebody, this mocap thing that I'm doing, and I was explaining it to like a rock star. He had no idea about mocap, and he sends me a video of Benedict Cumberbatch doing I don't know, The Lion King or something like that, and he's crawling on the ground like going crazy, and I'm like, oh, he's way better at this than me, right? I was like, I'd never seen it before, and then I ran it. I told somebody that story who works in the digital world, and they were like, they couldn't use any of that because he kept covering all this stuff, and I was like, okay, I feel a little bit.
You have to use so much imagination, though, as you said, because you're in the performance capture volume, and then Hideo and his team are adding so much of the graphics and the look and feel of it. When you finally saw the completed game, Norman, was it what you expected, or was it different?
It was more than I expected. I mean, I knew it would be mind-blowing for sure. When I finally saw even the trailers, and the trailers were released to the public so I could share the trailers, I showed everybody I know. I was blown away by it. It also music people that I know who even dabble in that type of musical score and create atmosphere for films and so forth. Everybody was blown away. They continue to be blown away. It's such another level of art and storytelling that I hadn't known before this. So, it's the cookie jar is off the lid now for me. I can't. I can only imagine sort of how far this can go. That's I'm hiding behind Hideo like a linebacker.
Well, but when it came out, 2019. 3 years ago, I'm sure ever since, I mean, you must have a lot of people that come up to you, or when you meet with fans or hear from people about what that game means to them. What does it mean to you in retrospect, 3 years later?
Most of the people just come to me and say, oh my God, what's he like? Talking about him. That's the first thing they say. But I mean, 3 years later, still, it's mind blowing to me. But people ask me questions like, "How do you do this? How did that happen? What did you have to do?" And I kind of explain up to a certain point, and then I go, "I don't know." Then they do that. But a lot of people, the most common question I get is what's Hideo like? That's the most common thing. And
what do you say?
How does he? They ask me how he directs you. How does he explain this to you? And I say, the thing with Hideo is like I almost feel like, we have a certain type of relationship that's on set, but also offset. I feel like he really takes care of his actors. There's some directors that don't, and the really good ones do, and you feel very safe sort of journeying into the unknown with him, because he's got your best interest at heart. He loves what he's doing. He appreciates that you're there working with him. It's a very comfortable, safe working environment. That's the most common question I get is, how does he explain this to you? How does he work? What does he say? What does he do?
So performance capture takes place in a room with nothing. You're not on location. It's basically like a green screen. It takes like 3 years too. There needs to be trust between myself and the actors in order to see it through, because it can get pretty tough. So in the process of casting, the important things to keep in mind are the actors' performances and abilities, but also whether or not we can have a trusting relationship.
And you guys clearly have a good trust, so much that you're back in DS2, it looks like, based on the teaser, which is great to see that Sam has returned. So I know you're just starting production on that now with Hideo and the team, Norman, and you're also working on, you have a new spin-off series of Walking Dead you're working on too, right?
Yeah, I'm in here. I've been in France for about 4 months. We have 2 weeks worth of shooting in the can. Yeah, I'm doing that, and then doing Jeff Nichols, the bike rider, in Ohio at the same time. So I'm kind of bouncing back and forth.
Wow, that's a ton of projects, and obviously, DS2, the PCAP, and just like the first game, I'm sure you'll be shooting in kind of segments as Hideo develops the story and the the script and whatnot. But I was happy to see Sam in the teaser. So Sam is back. I don't know how much more we can say than that, but it's any sense today we saw Sam in the teaser. Can you tell us anything about Sam in DS2?
今のところあんまり言えないですけど、
I can't say much yet.
I tried, guys. I tried.
みんな
I believe a lot of people like Sam, and so I'm hoping those people will return to play DS2. And in order to appeal to those who didn't play the first one, I've made the game nostalgic, but also new. I can't say any more than that right now.
That's enough, but obviously you're working on it now. We saw Sam maybe looks a little bit older, but we'll see. Who knows what's going on in the world of DS2? So we'll have to wait and see. But Norman, when your collaboration with Hideo this time around, is it going to be any different? I mean, you've obviously gone through this once, so you're probably even more comfortable with sort of the process and what he's doing. But what's it been like for you so far?
It's been great. It is true. The process was new to me, and I was learning how to do it as we were making it. I feel way more confident going into the second one than I did in the first one, just on what I've learned I can do and can't do. There's that element of wonder when you're, I used to play games like Defender, you know what I mean, and they're so not even close to this level of gaming. But as far as like the storyline, I understand more now. I understand the other characters, where they're coming from and how they interact with Sam. So I'm excited. I'm excited to push it a little bit further on my end as well and give him a little bit more of what he wants. And I'm excited to see anything that he does. So I couldn't be more excited and honored to be working with him.
続編なので、2回目なんですね、ノーマンと。
This is a sequel, so it's my second time working with Norman. And the technology has really improved over the last 3 years. Things that were impossible before are now possible. So we have been really challenging ourselves. It's not just a regular sequel in that sense.
And you guys, you probably haven't seen each other in person in a while, because I know Hideo's had to direct a lot remotely due to the pandemic and whatnot.
そうなんです、リモートなんですよ。
Yeah, we have been working remotely because of COVID.
So I don't know if you, I remember TGA back in 2019, you guys were all together. It was last time I saw you, Hideo, and you, Norman, but it seems like you guys have been apart. So a lot of your work so far, Norman, I guess, has been remote, right? With talking to Hideo and being remote, right?
会ってないですね。
Yeah, we haven't seen each other.
It's pretty wild because there's like these life-size iPads in the room. and you're like, I'm trying to explain. They're like, I'm like, oh, he was in Japan while I was in California. They're like, how does he do it? And I'm like, well, there's these life-size iPads around the room. He's like, beep, he's on this one, and then beep, he's over there on that one. It's like,
Okay.
it's crazy. It's like, I don't know. It's some sort of like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's that special.
僕説明します。
Okay, let me explain. Sony has this new technology system called the Mado. It means window in Japanese. So just like Norman said, it looks like an enormous iPad. So imagine that you have 2 of these enormous iPads at Kojima Productions, and there are also 2 at the PCAP set. The visuals and the sound are interactive. You're connected in real time to the other side. The other side of the Mado could be like New York or something. It feels like an illusion almost. Like the person on the screen is right there.
Wow. Yeah, because I see you sometimes tweet the photos of you kind of sitting in the director's chair with the big screen. So you'll be sitting at the office at KJP in Tokyo, and then Norman, you're on set, and then Hideo is sort of directing you remotely, but it feels like he's in the room.
そうですね。はい
Yes, exactly.
There's several giant.
Wow.
He's all around me. It's
12月からはもう現地に
But starting in December and here on out, I'll be going to the set for the performance captures.
Oh, great. But yeah, still, I mean, that was what's tough in the pandemic, and the fact that you have to make this, and I mean, I'm sure affected production for you for Walking Dead and the new series, Norman. But I know you got the the Hollywood Walk of Fame star. By the way, congratulations this year. That was amazing.
おめでとう。
Congratulations.
Thank you. I didn't see that one coming. Pretty wild. Yeah, thank you. It was a good day. It was. I'm right next to Mr. Rogers. I'm right next to Dr. Seuss. I'm next to George Romero. It's pretty wild. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I'm sure you probably get a TV icon, and I know they have different icons. I'm like, you should get a video game one now too, because you're a star of many mediums now.
ビデオゲームの人はまだないんでしょ、あれ。
No one from video games has won that, right?
No, I don't think so. Not yet. But that's the next step, right? Because it's the future of all this. Well, we can't wait to hear what or see what you're doing with Hideo. I know it'll be a little while till we probably see more, but it's exciting that you're going to spend, I know, a lot of time next year doing PCAP. And tell us a bit more about you have the spinoff that you're filming now. You said Daryl Dixon, so that's going to be coming next year too.
I think it comes next year. Yeah, it's pretty epic. It's completely different in style and tone and sound and the look. All of it's completely different. So we'll be shooting here for at least a year, but we're shooting in the Louvre. We're shooting in catacombs. We're gonna mess this place up. So, but it's a big show here. I didn't realize how big it was in France, but it's a big one.
And then a little DS2 in between it. And Hideo, are you excited about the spinoff? Because I know you're a big fan of the series, and obviously Daryl and Norman and as a character, right?
はいはい。
Yeah. Walking Dead went on for 10 years, and I think it influenced dramas not just in the US, but all over the world. After The Walking Dead, I think there was a lot of change. And Norman plays Daryl, a character that doesn't exist in the original story. And in the end, he became the main character. I think everyone is eager to see the spin-off. I'm a fan of The Walking Dead, but also as a Norman Reedus fan, I can't miss this. I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. So we'll get lots more Norman, Daryl Dixon, DS2, and I'm sure many other things as well. And you said you're doing a project in Ohio, you said too, Norman?
Yeah, Jeff Nichols is directing a film called The Bike Riders. Austin Butler's in it, Tom Hardy's in it, like a lot of Michael Shannon, a lot of good actors are in it.
Cool.
It's based off of Danny Lyon's photography book called The Bike Riders. And I play a character named Funny Sonny.
ちょっと怪我しないでね。
Make sure you don't get injured, okay, Norman?
It's funny because my first scene on that, before I even met the cast, really, was riding a 1950s suicide shift motorcycle down a wet hill across a field full of potholes. And then I get off and I talk to maybe 300 extras staring at me and then the main cast. And I'm like, what? So if I didn't get hurt in that first scene, I think I'm golden.
Love it. Well, sounds like you're busy on many things, but we're so glad you're back for DS2. And I'm sure we will find out more in due time when Hideo lets us understand more about what's going on with Sam.
It's going to be great. I know it'll be great.
Thanks so much, Norman.
Thank you.
ノーマンありがとうございます。
Thanks, Norman.
ブレインストラクチャー、早くもエンディングのお時間です。
It is now time to wrap up the episode.
Well, it was such a great episode. It was nice to have Norman on, and we tried to get a little more information out of him about what's going on in DS2. I wasn't very successful. Hideo is keeping his cards close to his vest, but I'm very excited about the collaboration, and clearly the two of them have an incredible relationship with each other. That's it for this episode of Brain Structure. We're looking to hear from our listeners too. If you have a message for Mr. Kojima, you have thoughts on the program, or if you have ideas for themes or guests for future episodes, please send them our way. The link to the message form can be found in the episode description.
はい。そうですね。
Yes, so we can't talk too much about DS2 today. I'm sorry. Please look forward to next week's episode of Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure.
さようなら。
Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure is a production by Spotify Studios in association with Kojima Productions and Fam Inc. TGA, the Jeff's Answer MC, Jeff Keighley. Narrator, Owen Maki. Music, Silent Poets. Visual design, Mechi Kuro. Producer, Hiro Furuki. Director, Kohei Takizawa. Executive producer at Spotify, Asami Sekine. Special thanks to Kojima Productions, Ayako Terashima, Masafumi Chiba, Miki Suga, and Aki Saito. Hosted by Hideo Kojima.
Since the announcement of Death Stranding 2, the excitement just doesn't stop. It was great to hear from Sam Bridges himself, Mr. Norman Reedus. We got to discover many stories from behind the scenes of Death Stranding and learn of the deep, trusting relationship Hideo Kojima and Norman have together. Speaking of which, I should reach out to some of my long-lost friends in Germany. But I don't have their numbers. What should I do?